Hi, everyone. Welcome to Our Disabled Future, a series where disabled voices lead the way. I'm your host, Nico. It is a good day for disability inclusion. Each day, during Disability Pride Month and beyond, I'm amplifying real disabled stories, where we are, where we want to go, and how the heck we're going to get there. Together, I hope. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Addie. Let's dive in. Hi, Addie. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Nico.
Of course. Tell us about yourself and about your disabled life.
So to start, my name is technically Constance, but I go by Addie. I would like to start off by saying that I was given that name because when my mom got pregnant with me, she had already been through more than one miscarriage, and she really wanted a girl, and she wanted to give me a name that, in her view, um, represented strengths and grace. And to her, that was Constance. And Addie is my name. As far as my disabled story goes, I'm disabled because I was born 10 weeks premature. It brought on several complications, which brought on a brain bleed, which brought on my permanent disability, which is cerebral palsy, abbreviated as CP. Cerebral palsy can affect different people in different ways. For me, it means that I cannot walk and I cannot drive. However, my intellectual abilities were in no way. As for my more, shall we say, expanded story, I think it's prevalent to note that I live in the deep South. I live in the southern state of Alabama, and I live in the lower part of Alabama, about as far south as you can get without running into water, unless, of course, you want to visit the lovely state of Florida. I currently live in the same house that I grew up in. I have always lived in this house except for a short stint that I spent at the University of Alabama, which is located in Tuscaloosa. As far as my overall story, it was pretty, shall we say, general. I went through the public school system, all through elementary school, middle school, high school, and then, of course, on to college. That said, with that came usual challenges that you expect, unfortunately, as part of the disability community. Yes, there was discrimination issues. And my mother was a single parent, and there was hardly a school year that went by that she didn't have to take off time from work in order to come down to whatever school I was attending to make sure that my accommodations under the disability this the Americans with Disabilities Act and my P were being seen to properly. As far as that goes, I graduated high school with honors and went straight into college with a combination of scholarships and other state funded systems. That said, first year went great, appropriate GPA, the whole 9 yards. And then starting in my second year of college, I began to get really sick. It was slow but progressive. I couldn't eat properly, I couldn't sleep properly, and because I couldn't eat or sleep properly, I, of course, did not feel comfortable trying to navigate my wheelchair all the way across campus, the worse it got, in order to attend my lectures. And so therefore, what happened? Went the grades, which of course means out went the funding. And so I was forced to drop out of college. Came home, took me about a year to get my health situation under control. And then I began to look for employment with the assistance of my local Goodwill Easter Seals and Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services office. And we tried everything for 2 years straight. We were upfront about the fact that I have a disability because my disability is what you call a visible disability. I use a wheelchair full time. You can't miss it. It's literally, if you'll pardon the expression, in your face. So 2 years went by, not the first interview, and I'm like, this isn't working. And so then I started my own business, which you can now see the current logo for at the top, what is my left-hand side of your screen, the pink and blue wheelchair with the words Access for All Homo Strides in pink and blue at the bottom. Access for All LLC is a consulting company which I started, which pertains to consulting on the basics of the Americans with Disabilities Act and compliance with such. I can go into more detail about that later, but I think that, Nico, that's a good segue for your next question.
Thanks, Addie. I appreciate this. I've heard aspects of your life story that I had not heard before, so I wanted to thank you. What does a disability-friendly future look like for you?
So, disability future, particularly as you said when you sent me the questions, a disability-friendly future looks like a society where not only myself, but the disability community at large is accepted for what we can do and do currently do for everyday society. I'm going to have to get a little statistical here, okay? The worldwide population of people with disabilities, as per last time I checked, is currently at about 1.3 billion and is only expected to grow. Why is this? For those of us that don't know, this is because disability can happen to anyone at any time. Mine just happened to come due to birth complication circumstances. That's only one of the ways it can happen. Someone could be leaving work or a social event one day, and heaven forbid, be involved in a perfectly innocent accident that brings on lifelong disability. Someone could have a serious illness that comes on in the middle of life. Someone could, unfortunately, be the victim of crime, which brings on permanent disability. And of course, even aging itself can cause the rest of one's life disability-related issues. So there are issues right now where they're in certain aspects of science, particularly medical science, where there is this need to, if you'll pardon me, quote unquote, cure disability or eliminate the possibility of disability from society. Both professionally and personally for me, this does not seem plausible and possible, because in order to do that, you would have to eliminate the even remote possibility of all of those causing factors, which I have just named. And not only that, but we have to understand that because we have people with disabilities on such a large scale, and the fact that that is projected to grow, okay? We also have people with disabilities who are currently involved in every industry. A study done by Accenture and Disability In as a collaboration in 2018 called Getting to Equal estimates through their research that the disability community alone as a whole contributes over 20 billion, notice I said billion, not million, dollars back to the US government in discretionary funds every year. And mind you, that was a pre-pandemic number. And so with the pandemic and the uptick in remote work, I would estimate that that number has grown. And so in order for the disability future to be friendly, we must look at it as a three-pronged, intertwined issue. It is not simply a humanitarian issue. It is not simply a legal issue, but it is also a economic issue, and all three are intertwined. I know we have a limited amount of time for this episode, but I'd like to give you a quick real-world example that practically anyone can use. What is one thing that practically everyone does in the morning when they get up and get going? They get either a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, especially if you're in America and you work, long hours or put in long hours for personal hours. You want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea on your way to work. Let's say you decide to go to your local coffee shops to get that morning cup. Okay, you have to be able to get to that building. You have to be able to get into that building, and you have to be able to order and exit all in a timely and safe manner. And if you are a person with a disability, this goes into the humanitarian sector, as it is your human to be able to buy a cup of coffee. This goes into the legal issue, as doing so is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it goes into the socioeconomic issue, because when you pay for a cup of coffee, especially if you pay for a cup of coffee regularly, what are you doing? You're contributing to the economy. And that is only a very simple example. There are much more intricate examples that you can apply it to, very high level examples, such as the medical field, the national security field. And yes, I have known people with disabilities that have in the national security field. A late friend of my mother's lived with spina bifida, and for many years in her career, she worked putting together these schedules for the teams that had canine bomb checkers. She would put together their schedules, and she was trained and paid to do so.
Addie, thank you again. I really appreciate the comprehensive nature of these answers. In your answer, I hear a greater call for accessibility, better integration for disabled people like you and I can really support that. My third question asks, how do we build that future? What specific strategies do we use? What do you think?
Okay. Well, this goes back to that three-prong issue that I mentioned in my last answer. Some of you may be saying, well, that's both a simple and complicated answer, but as per the simple aspect, some of you may be asking, why do we not already have something that looks very similar to that three-prong system? Let me just answer that potential question by saying we have the framework. Unfortunately, the reason we don't have it in full working order is a very controversial problem. And I must give a warning that some viewers may take offense to what I'm about to say. A warning. But the reason we do not have a workable system such as I just described as of yet is due to generational systemic stereotyping. Okay? People with disabilities are taught from a very early age or from the onset of their disability, if it comes later. Do not expect to finish your education. Do not expect to get married. Do not expect to have a paying and meaningful career that assists society. You are not intelligent enough for such things, etc., etc., etc. And yes, I have heard this rhetoric, not from my family and support system, but I was a victim of indirect bullying in high school. I was a very good student, and some people took offense to such. Okay, there was this idea that because I was disabled Okay. I had everything I could need and or want handed to me on a silver platter. That was kind of the rumor, you might say, that went around the high school mill. And there was a group of girls that would make it their point to purposely put their feet out in front of my wheelchair during class switching times, that if I had accidentally gotten their foot, they could have claimed that I did it on purpose and gotten me into some serious. Thankfully, my mother went through the proper channels and the issue was dealt with. But these are the kinds of issues that we are looking at as a society. My story is not unique. I just did it as a real life example. Okay. Those are the myths and the stereotypes that we are told. In reality, people with disabilities are highly intelligent, highly adaptable, and let me just address a particular stereotype: the issue of intellectual disabilities. I do not live with intellectual disabilities, but I know and have collaborated with, on both a professional and personal level, people that do. Let's take a very specific disability, Down syndrome. There are instances where people with Down syndrome are seen as less intelligent due to the way that their disability affects them. That is not the case. People with Down syndrome are oftentimes entrepreneurs. In fact, I can give a real world example that you can find proof of through a simple Google search. Okay. There is a woman in Boston. She runs her own cookie company. It is called Coletti's Cookies. She started, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but she had gone through high school and through job training and all those sorts of programs that her vocational rehab office offered, and had gone through the typical job search process, just as I did, and was repeatedly told, thank you for coming in for this interview, but we don't think that you would be a good fit. And so eventually she said, enough of this, baking is my niche. So I'll start a company around that. And she makes custom cookies. She has contracts with multiple chains in and around Boston. She ships all across the United States and all across Canada. Her publicly shared net is at 1 million plus. And just to be clear, I have not violated anyone's privacy. All of this can be proved through a matter of her website and public. But these are the kinds of stories that we as a society need to understand. Disability is not going anywhere. It is vital to every aspect of society. In fact, without disability, I don't know that American society can survive.
That was very powerful. Thank you, Addie. I'm sorry that you've encountered such difficulty throughout your life. It's not right that you're not given the opportunities that you would, quite frankly, excel at, As we close our time together, I want to give you a chance that you and I, as disabled people, rarely get, and that is a chance to brag about yourself, promote anything you've got coming up, or maybe something you've got that you've done recently. If you want people to find you online, where can we do that? This is just your chance to be your own cheerleader. So go ahead and brag about yourself.
Of course, I have my business, which I've already mentioned. You can find my website, accessrawllc.com. That is my website URL. I am very active on LinkedIn. You can look up Constance Addie Ray on LinkedIn. As far as what I have going up, coming up this weekend, actually, which is why I don't mind sharing it on this video. I will be graduating from what is called Partners in Policymaking, particularly the Alabama chapter. It is a program that has chapters in, I think, at least 46, and it exists in order to train people with disabilities and or their family members and immediate it's on how to communicate and collaborate with legislatures on every level of government as per to advocate for positive legislation for people with disabilities, so that positive legislation goes through in a timely manner to better society. Now, in order to graduate from this program, I had to decide on a project to do. It could be directly related to legislation or not, but it did have to fall into a key area of disability issue pertaining to independent living, education, employment, and there was one other potential area that unfortunately I can't remember off the top of my head. But the area I chose was employment. And another program member that was going through this at the same time that I did chose that area as well. So we chose to team up for our project. And what we chose to do, because we were both entrepreneurs and we both have disabilities, and we both recognize the importance of entrepreneurship to the disability community, we decided to start a project that pertains to, it is a program starting where we live in Alabama, will help people with disabilities to number one, understand upfront, that while entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and it should not be billed as being for everyone, it is a viable option that should be considered for people with disabilities. It should be given to them upfront as a potential employment choice. So we'll be doing awareness training as to that. It is our goal to be able to provide the resources and support for people at all steps of the entrepreneurship journey, startup, maintaining, and growth. That is just, a brand new program. As far as, any of my services, you can find those on my website. It should also be noted that despite all I do not currently hold any degrees in higher education. However, I am on the verge of completing the requirements that I have to complete in order to be a certified ADA coordinator. I am also in the process of applying for a fully online accredited university that is not entirely free, but what is known as tuition free. It is called the University of the People, and I am applying to their Bachelor's in Science of Business Administration.
That's remarkable. You would be wonderful with that. Thank you for telling me about it.
Is there anything else I can answer for you?
Not at all. Thank you so much, Addie. All right, folks, tune in next time. Remember, this is our disabled future, and we're building it one day at a time together. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'm rooting for you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Bye.